In this week's EV news, new legislation arrives to make public charging easier and more reliable. Tesla offer 0% interest finance on the Model 3 in the UK. And 7 town centres in Northumberland are to receive new rapid chargers. Welcome back to another EV News. Loads of you tuned in to last week's episode, but if you did miss it, there's a link in the description so that you can catch up. I'm not sure if my little special guest will make an appearance again this week. She's a bit of a lot unto herself, so she might appear, she might not. So make sure you watch to the end so that you don't miss out on that. As always, make sure you like this video, and if you're new here, click subscribe so that you don't miss out on the next one. We're opening with a huge story this week. New legislation has been announced in the UK to make public charging easier and more reliable. Quite some time ago now, there was a government consultation that took place, and I made a video about this at the time, where they were gathering people's feedback about improving the experience at public charging points. And they were asking questions about pricing, about reliability, about the data that the charge point providers made available to you, and a bunch of questions along those kind of lines. And it looks like the government might have actually listened for once, because they've just published a draft of the Public Charge Point Regulations 2023. Although in draft form at the moment, looks like it will come to pass and come into law fairly shortly. The legislation covers payment, performance, data and pricing. Areas that I think everybody would agree need to be standardised and there needs to be some control over. Let's take a look at each of these in turn. First one is payment, and this one is absolutely huge. Any new charge point with a power output of over 8 kilowatts must have contactless payment within a year of the legislation going live. This is a good thing if you ask me, but I do wonder if what we'll now see then is operators rolling out less and less 22 kilowatt AC chargers, because at the moment 22 kilowatts fairly cheap and easy to install. You can just put it in, you can use an app to control payment and stuff. You don't need to worry about a contactless payment reader and all the data management and compliance stuff that goes with that, and then any maintenance requirement that goes with that. It's literally just as easy as basically a glorified version of the charge point you might have at home that supports 3-phase and can charge at 22 kilowatts AC. This requirement does mean there'll be a little bit more outlay, and I do wonder if some providers might start shying away a little bit from deploying new 22 kilowatt AC ports, which would be bad news for owners of cars like the early Renault Zoes, which can only charge 22 kilowatts. GridServe do already do this. They already have 22 kilowatt standalone AC units with card readers on them, so it can be done, but just fingers crossed operators don't take the easy way out and just stick to putting 7 kilowatt posts in everywhere, because I think that would actually be a backward step. Existing 22 kilowatt AC chargers could continue as they are. There is no retrofit requirement at that level. The only retrofit requirement the operators are going to have is that any rapid charger, and for this any rapid charger is defined as any with a power output of 50 kilowatts or over, would have to have contactless payment added to it. So if it's an existing unit over 50 kilowatts, it will have to have contactless added, but the 22 kilowatt AC stuff that's installed at the moment will escape from that retrofit requirement. Now, in reality, I think operators that are going to start rolling out contactless payment to their 22 kilowatt AC chargers and are going to continue to install them with that will just change all of them. But I think maybe some of the smaller ones might not bother, and they might just not actually retrofit their existing stuff and probably stop rolling out 22 kilowatt AC going forward. Let's not let that get in the way of the real benefit here though, right? This is actually a huge step forward, because you should, within a couple of years of this coming into force, be able to rock up to any rapid charger in the country, tap a contactless card and charge a car. No messing about, no apps, no have I got the right app, or do I need to go to this website, or do I need to do this? And now here's looking at you, Ionity, because you're one of the biggest offenders with this. But it will just be rock up, scan your card, charge your car, and that's how it should be. Tesla have even showcased one of their V4 superchargers at the Goodwood Festival of Speed at the weekend there, with a payment card reader built in, so even Tesla are getting ready for this. The other item concerning payment in these regulations is that all charge point operators must, from within a year of the regulations coming into force, sign up to a roaming payment provider. So if you think things like Octopus, Electroverse, and there's loads of others where it's like a Bonnet is another sort of notable one. It's like a one-size-fits-all, use our app to access loads of different chargers type deal. So every charge point provider must use one of these. That doesn't mean to say they all need to use the same one. So I'm not sure this is actually particularly amazing. I'm not sure this is that much of a step forward. There's still going to be loads of these roaming providers. They're still all going to use different charge point operators. And therefore, if you want to use one of those, if you want to use something like Bonnet or Octopus Electroverse, you're still probably going to use more than one of those so that you can access the networks you're interested in. So I think forcing everyone to use at least one, I don't really know what the benefit of that is. Let me know in the comments what you think, but I don't see there's any real gain from that. The contactless thing is the real big thing as far as payments concerned. The next area, performance, is an area we can all agree on that much improvement is needed and regulation is needed. So the regulations here, I think, are very, very welcome. Within a year of the legislation coming into force, charge point operators must have 99% reliability across their network. A charger that is inoperative or out of order would be deemed to be not reliable and therefore would impact this metric. What is a little bit weird though is any charger that has an unknown status or has a status of blocked would be exempt from the reliability metrics. Now, I think it's fair enough for blocked. Operators can't control one of their chargers becoming blocked, and so it wouldn't be fair to penalise them because people are blocking them. That's an outside factor you can't control. But an unknown status suggests some kind of failure in the communication between the charger and where they present the data to. And I don't really think that should be exempt, because I could actually see operators gaming that a little bit. I could see them say, oh, well, yeah, those ones were unknown. They weren't out of order, they were unknown. See, I'm not so sure about that. What is quite cool is they will be required to publish reliability information on their website, as well as provide a report to the Secretary of State. So I think what we'll see is when they're all having to publish reliability stats themselves, and we'll not be waiting for these like customer satisfaction surveys to come out, like the ZapMap survey that comes out every year. The operators themselves will have to say, oh, we are currently 97% reliable or whatever. And I think that could be really good for if they're going to have to put on their website in black and white, we are X% reliable, that gives them an incentive to be more reliable. Because ultimately, you would decide to use another operator over one that is telling you themselves that they're not very reliable. This is vastly overdue. There hasn't been any real regulation of how reliable chargers are, and I think this will make a really big change to how easy it is to travel in an EV in the UK. Operators will also be required to run a 24/7 helpline for customers. I think most of them do this already. Let me know if you know of any that don't, but they will be required to going forward. The data requirement is an interesting one. Some operators already do this, but basically they'll be required to publish information on availability, location, pricing, and what they're calling reference data, which is things like how many connectors there are at a location, the tariff, the payment methods they accept, and the hours are like the opening hours for each charge point. Data will need to be provided free of charge and in a machine-readable format. And there must be no requirement for you to agree to terms and conditions regarding how you're going to use that data. It just needs to be available for consumption. It's not going to affect everybody, but what I do think will happen is we'll see a bit of an explosion in websites and apps tracking this data and actually helping you make use of that and showing you live which chargers are working where and all that kind of stuff. So I think that could be a good thing, and it would be interesting to see what kind of innovation we see come out of that going forward. The final item in the legislation is pricing. Now this one's quite interesting, I thought. Charge point operators must display a price in pence per kilowatt hour, either on the charger or on a separate device that doesn't require the customer to have signed up for anything or entered into a pre-existing contract with the provider. They must ensure that the price does not increase once a charging session has started, which I thought that was a little bit of a weird clause, but I hope this means, though, that we'll see the end of connection fees and minimum like VENs and per minute or per hour billing and all these other weird tariffs that we see around charging, and everybody just starts billing price per kilowatt hour. I think that would be much simpler, much better than some of these convoluted tariffs that some of the operators seem to come up with. There's no mention in any of this of overstay fees, which I think is a bit of a shame because it would have been nice for them to actually make this mandatory, so the operators must charge overstay fees on rapids to discourage people from dumping their cars for ages after they've finished charging. And I do hope this mention of pricing needs to be in pence per kilowatt hour means that overstay fees and stuff don't actually become illegal, because technically I guess it would be a tariff that isn't in pence per kilowatt hour. So it'll be interesting to see how that one pans out. That's the summary of these new regulations. Overall, I think this is a hugely positive move for public charging in the UK. It should lead to big improvements in areas that are very lacking at the moment. But what do you think? Do you think this is enough? Do you think it's what we needed? Do you think they could have done more? I always like to hear what you think in the comments, so do let me know what you make of these new regulations. Next up, in a move that I think could send a shockwave through the EV market again, Tesla have started offering 0% interest financing on the Model 3. I'm guessing the explosion in Model Y sales has meant that the Model 3 is lagging a little bit and they're keen to keep things moving, but I think it's going to give other car makers another shock yet again. Right now, if you go onto the Tesla website, select a brand new Model 3 and get a finance quote, it will give you a quote at 0% interest on PCP. This applies to both factory orders, but also the existing inventory, which is offered with a couple of £1,000 discount over the list price. So that's cars that are already built, but are brand new and haven't been delivered and haven't been sold. You can buy those with a couple of grand off, which actually makes it an even better deal. Of course, we're still talking about a £40,000 car here, but you're looking at sort of £4,000 down, £440 a month, and then a final payment at the end. If you're going to buy a Model 3 anyway, that seems like really good value to me, and it completely knocks the socks off any leasing deals that are available on the Model 3 at the moment. What is a little bit weird is if you're a business rather than personal buyer, those figures actually go down a little bit. The monthly payment goes down, and I thought at first, oh, that's VAT, they're not showing the VAT in the price. But actually, the guaranteed future value, which is the final payment on a PCP, is higher if you're a business customer than a personal customer. I don't quite know what that's all about. It looks like they use different funders for business versus personal, and I dare say that means that that finance company values it more than the other, but it does seem really, really odd. You're talking about £4,000 over a 48-month agreement, and that's a big difference. It's a serious amount of money, but if you're going to buy a Model 3 anyway, taking one at 0% interest could be a really good move. Given finance interest rates are obviously increasing in line with the ever-increasing Bank of England base rate, this move really amounts to Tesla discounting the Model 3 even more for people that are going to buy it on finance. I think that's another blow for the other manufacturers. I think you're going to struggle to sell things like the Volkswagen ID4 or any of the other sort of meh cars from other manufacturers when you can buy a Model 3 on 0%. And as you know, I'm not the biggest Tesla fanboy in the world, but I don't think you can ignore the economics here. Now then, used bargain of the week. Well, last week's one actually spurred me on to make a whole video about the cheap Renault Zoes that are on the market. So if you haven't seen that yet, there's a link to that in the description. You should definitely check it out because I think it's really interesting stuff. Zoe looks like really good value for money right now. But this Corsa, this electric Corsa, looks like an absolute bargain, I would say. 17,500 miles on the clock on a 21 reg. It's a private sale and there's a little bit of a red flag because they say it's had its first service, but they've lost the service book. I'm not quite sure what I make of that. There are some at dealers for about £1,000 more, but a lot of those have done quite a few more miles than this one, so for a low mileage, clean and tidy car, it does look like a good deal. However, I would be trying hard to verify this claim about the service history because it just seems a little bit dodgy. It's a little bit too convenient, isn't it, that they've just happened to have lost the service book. I don't know. I'm always very suspicious of things like that. So definitely, if you were going to look at something like this, you'd go in with your eyes open. And maybe paying the extra to buy one from a main dealer would be a good move for you. If you can live with a relatively poor winter range of these 50 kilowatt hour Stellantis cars, it is a lot of car for the money. I drove a E208 when Ami was in getting fixed. I made a video about that, doing the sort of winter range test, and they're not brilliant in terms of efficiency when it's really cold, but all in all, pretty well appointed, decent cars, and I think the Corsa E is well up there. But let me know what you think. Would you take the plunge for one of these at this kind of money? I certainly think it represents pretty good value for money, just like a lot of these nearly new EVs that are out there, very low miles on, not that old. Things are definitely shaping up in the used market, and I definitely think there are some bargains out there. And finally, charging infrastructure news, of course. It wouldn't be an EV news without it, would it? Northumberland County Council have announced that they're going to install rapid chargers in Alnwick, Amble, Berwick, Morpeth, Ashington, Hexham and Otterburn. It comes as they have been awarded £453,000 from the government's Levelling Up Fund to install new rapid chargers. They will be installed at Ashwood Business Park in Ashington, Chapel Street Car Park in Berwick, Greenwell Road in Alnwick, Newmarket Car Park in Morpeth, Otterburn Village, Queen Street Car Park in Amble, and Wentworth Car Park in Hexham. Council leader Glenn Sanderson said, "I am pleased with the Council's decision to welcome this additional funding which will help develop the EV infrastructure in the county. Since the UK has announced that it will be banning the sale of new petrol and diesel cars by 2030, we must ensure that our county has the necessary provision in place to support this." I've always said on this channel that any new infrastructure news should be very, very welcome. It is a really good thing, although I am a little bit apprehensive when that news is that a council has got a bunch of government funding and they're putting some rapids in some of their car parks. I know a lot of people dismiss destination chargers, saying, "Oh, 7 kilowatt AC chargers are useless, we need rapids, we need this." But often, right, away from trunk roads and away from sort of major routes, is a rapid actually what you need? Or would you be better with like 27 kilowatt chargers which you can install for the same kind of money? It's really hard. I do hope that these ones are in the right places and they're going to be useful to people that live in those areas, but I'm always very, very sceptical when I hear that a council is decided that some rapids are the answer. It's welcome news regardless. Let me know in the comments if you're from the Northumberland area and you know these locations I'm talking about, where they are. Let me know what you think, because you might say, well, actually, it's a bit of a charging desert and actually that's a really good place to put some rapids. But I do wonder, so let me know what you think in the comments. But that's it from this week's EV News. Slightly fewer stories than usual, but I knew that one about the new regulations was going to take a while. As always, let me know your thoughts on all of these stories in the comments. Make sure you like this video, and if you're new here, subscribe as well so that you don't miss out on the next one. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.